All right, so this morning I sent you two things. This was one of them right here, but I just want to make sure everybody sees this. So this is your homework for Chapter 13. There are, move that down, 6 problems. The first 3 are in the book. You're just going to key in what's in the book. All right. So you have to do the discount delegate demo, which is on pages 616, 617, and 618. The discount delegate demo 2, which is on 619, 620, and 621. When you do this one here, copy this folder. Don't start brand new because there's just some superficial changes you have to make. Do the demo bank event. So those 3 again are right from in the book. Right now in class, we're going to do these 2. Exercise 3 on page 652, the classic book selector, and exercise 5, Florence's floral creations. I didn't like any of her exercises, but these were the ones I could stomach the best. All right, so we're going to do those, and then number 6, which is called guess a number, you're going to do that on your own, and it's really not very difficult. We'll look at that also in just a bit. All right. And remember, when you're doing this now, that tomorrow, all right, Wednesday, we'll do the written and then we'll lecture and do the review and the test review. If there's any time left, there'll be lab. But remember, you will have lab for 3 hours on Friday, and you will have lab for about 3 hours on Monday. So ideally, even though there's a lot I'm asking you to do, you'll have plenty of time to do it in that time. All right. So let's take a look at what it says in the book here. First one then is number 3. Create a project named Classic Book Selector. This is exactly what I gave you. Right, this thing right there in the blue. That's exactly what's in the prologue. So create this project. So we're going to start up a brand new project. It will be a GUI project, so a Windows form, and it'll be called Classic Book Selector. The good news is both of these, you're only going to have to key in about 20 lines for each one. There's not a lot of code that you have to write. All right. So it's going to contain a form. The form's going to have a list box, and there's going to be 2 labels. And that's basically going to be it. All right. It's going to look pretty much like this, just so you see it. When we get done, it's going to look like this. The labels are going to be invisible, and when we run it, it's going to look like this. If you look up on the screen here, first thing it says is when you hover over the list box, notice how we get a message that comes up? Just so you get some practice doing that. And as soon as you take it out, it goes away. All right. Then if I highlight any one of these, notice what happens. The color changes, and I get a very little synopsis, which is, in other words, it's a sentence explaining what the book is about. So as we peruse our way through here, you'll notice that each time the colors change and the synopsis changes. And like I said, there's really not very much code you have to do in order to do this. All right. I will tell you that when you take the test next week, you will be filling up 2 different, unless I change it, but at least 1 list box. All right, so you'll be creating something, and then you'll be putting the results in a list box. All right, and when you get done, there'll be a button on there where you click the button, and you'll also send those results, the same thing that's in the list box, you'll send them out to a file. All right, so if I do put anything in from this chapter, I might have something like this where you hover over it. All right, I think you can all do that, and that way it'll give you some free points. All right, so if you just hover over the list box, that you get a message, and then when you move out, it goes away. That kind of an idea. All right, so let's go and start to create this then. So I'm going to start a brand new project in what was this Classic Book Selector. So File, New, Project. Not sure why this is taking so long. There we go. All right, Windows Forms app, and it's called Classic Book Selector. Make sure you have a Windows Forms app and not a console app. Save it wherever you've been saving things. So very simply, we're going to just make some superficial changes. So I'm going to click on the form. I'm going to change the name of the form to Form Classic Book Selector. And I'm going to change the text on the form also to Classic Book Selector, but I'll say something like Chapter 13, Problem number 3, Classic Book Selector. All right, let me widen that out so you can see it. There. That's pretty simple. All right. Our interface, again, is going to be very, very simple. We're going to add, right now, we're going to add a list box right here, and then 2 labels down below it. So if you look up on the screen, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a list box, drag it out there, make it, that should be plenty wide, so it's pretty much even. All right. I'm going to change the name of it to List Box Book Selector. All right. And I'm going to add 2 labels. One here and one down here. Now this is going to be a little different from what we've done in the past because we are going to set the label's visible property on both of these. We're going to set it to false. We haven't been doing that before. All right. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to highlight both labels. And if you remember, if we set it auto size to false, we can make these bigger. So I'm going to make them both about, so they're about the same size and the same width as the label. All right. Now, again, if you really need to, we can change the colors on both of these. It really and truly does not matter that much. All right. Just make them kind of that light pink. All right. And the first one, I'm going to call this label quote. All right. And the text is actually going to say on here, I don't remember what it says, so I'm going to have to highlight it. It's going to say this. Reading opens your mind to new worlds. All right. Again, you can go nuts with a font color. You can go nuts with the font size. You can bold it if you want. It really and truly does not matter. I guess that's a little too big. Let's cut it down to 10. All right. This right here, this reading opens your mind to new worlds. That's what's going to appear on the screen. All right, that's what's going to, when we hover over the list box. All right, so that's the quote that's going to appear. Now, one more thing is I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to find the visible property, and I'm going to set it to false. That doesn't affect it on the screen here, but that means that when we run the program, it won't show. All right, until we make it visible again, and we will do that in just a minute. All right, so that's the first one. The second label that's right here, I'm going to call this label synopsis. synopsis. And literally what that's going to do is it's going to give the synopsis of the book, which is, like I said, about a one-sentence explanation of what the book is about. All right, and I don't want there to be any text in it, so I'm going to leave that blank, and I'm again going to set the visible property to false. All right, so that's what this looks like right now. And again, list book selector, label quote, label synopsis. All right. I can do this right now, and that is I can highlight all of my controls, right mouse click, and choose lock. So now they're all locked. Okay. Now you may or may not be aware of this. I did mention this to you, but it was real early in the process, and that is if we highlight the list box here, there's two ways that you can fill, really three ways that you can fill the list box. You can fill it in code, which is totally fine to do, or if you look up on the screen here, I don't know if it's because it's locked or not. Let's check. Yep. All right. There's that little smart tag that's right up here, but I guess if you lock it, the smart tag goes away. So I'm going to lock it, but I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to find this thing that says items. All right, so make sure that the list box is highlighted, and go over here to items. Click, and it'll say collection over here, and if you click on the ellipsis, the three dots, it'll open it up. So it'll look like this. We're going to put in the title of 5 books. Catcher in the Rye, enter. Catch 22, enter. War and Peace, A Tale of Two Cities, and Little Women. All right, and I just used the same ones that the author used. Once you have those, click the OK button, and they should go right inside then. They should be right inside of your list box. All right? So there they are. Again, if you want to, you can play with the font on this, make it bigger. You don't have to do that. But if you want to do that, I guess that's, again, a little too big. All right. You can center it. You can do whatever you want to do with it. It's really and truly not that important. All right, so I'm going to leave it like that. So right now, the interface is totally built. So we can concentrate on putting the code in there. All right, and again, we don't have to double click on anything. You can just right mouse click on here and choose View Code, and that's going to bring us to right here. All right. Now the first thing I'm going to do you have to do this? No. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy in my prologue. So I'm going to take that, put it right before the actual code itself starts. So there that is. All right. And again, one of the reasons I'm doing that is I just want you to be cognizant of the fact that as you're writing code, you should put in some documentation. All right? Okay. So up at the top of the program, at the very top, even before I've got this initialized component, this is what's in here right now. All right? But at the very top, so right underneath where it says public partial class, we never really talked about this, but just so you know, the reason that that says partial class is sometimes you create a project that is so complex, you might decide that instead of having one class, you want to have several classes that make up, and you've seen a little bit of that. But you can have partial classes. So you can have a project that's made up of several partial classes if you want to do that. All right, so I'm going to come in here and right underneath this, so right up above this where it says, where it's got the actual constructor and the initialized component in here, I'm going to go and I'm going to add a couple variables. I guess declare. There's going to be two of them, but they're kind of big. The first one is going to hold all 5 of those synopses that we want to put in there. And the second one is going to hold a different color for each synopsis. The good news is after we put that in, we've got what? 1, maybe 7 or 8 lines of code to go, literally. All right. So the first thing we're going to put in here is I'm going to put in a string array, and then I'm going to call synopsis. And I'm going to set that equal to, and I'm going to put in curly braces here, all right, and I'm going to put in each one of these synopses, I don't know what you say, but so that's the first one. Again, that'll be a string array. Those will be what will appear. If you look up on the screen here, don't worry, I'll go right back to it. These things right here are what's going to appear in here. Does that make sense? All right, so when we click on Catcher in the Rye, what's going to appear in here should be a teenager spends time in New York. That kind of an idea. All right. All right, then we have to have one more variable. It'll be another array, and it'll be an array of colors. Notice once I put in here color, can you see that? It recognizes that we're going to be using colors. All right, I put in color, and it turned blue itself. And I'm just going to, since it's a bunch of colors, I'm going to call it colors. And again, we'll do it the same way we did the other one. But this will be color.red, color.blue, color.green, color.orange, and color.yellow. If you don't like those colors when you get done, call them anything you want. It really and truly won't matter. Or use whatever colors you want. All right? Does everybody have this synopsis? All right, and again, those are the colors. There's not really, like I said, not much code in here. So the first thing that we want to do, if you look up on the screen here, is we want to make sure that when we hover over this right here, that this becomes visible. All right. If I right now save this and run it, what you should notice is it doesn't show either one of those. That's correct. That's what we want to have happen. All right. So when we hover over this, what we want to have happen is we want that label that's called label quote, we want its visibility to be set to true. It's currently set to false. All right. And that's pretty simple to do. So with the list box here, this is what I want you to see. With the list box highlighted, all right, if we go over and we click on the lightning bolt there, what you'll notice is that there is a property there that's called mouse hover. See that? So I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to bring up the mouse hover for the list box. All right, and all we have to say is label quote dot visible equal true. All right, I'm not doing it the way the author did it here. I'm looking at the way she did it. I'm trying to figure out why she did it that way. But let's see if it works. I'll come right back to the code. Okay, well, I wanted it to leave. Maybe that's why she did it the way she did it. Okay. So let's see, we've got a mouse hover. Think of two ways to do this. I'm trying to think of which way here is better. Well, let's look. We've got this, and we've got something in here now. Come on. Yeah, well, you can. That's one way of doing it, to say that if it's true, make it false, otherwise make it true. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to kind of use it like a flag and just say that it is equal to not what it was equal to. All right, but what I want to see in here is, all right, we've got mouse hover. The other thing we can do is we can just put it in the mouse leave. So in the mouse hover, we put that it's the visible is equal to true, and in the mouse leave, we put the visible is equal to false. Let me double check and make sure that works. All right, see that? All right, and again, that's the code. So for the hover, you make it visible. For the mouse leave, or mouse hover, you make it visible. The mouse leave, you make it invisible. All right. That's actually considered, Colin, what you said, you could have done it that way. That's considered a cleaner way of doing it. Because technically, when you're hovering, that's when you're inside of it. When you're leaving, you're not there anymore. All right. I would still put it in the mouse hover, but it's going to be funky to do it that way. All right, and I might even end up putting it to someplace else that's not even shown on here. All right, so the only other thing that we have to do, like I said, we've got what? We've got a for loop with an if statement in it that's about 5 or 6 lines long. But what we want to do, so right now, all right, the way that this works, we're halfway there. We've got that showing. But the idea is what we want to have happen is when we click on here, we want this to show, this other one, the synopsis, and we want the right synopsis to show. So in other words, the first synopsis that we have in that array is the one for Catcher in the Rye. The last one is for Little Women. So not only do we want a synopsis to show, we want the right synopsis to show. Okay? What you may or may not realize if you look up on the screen here is every time you click here, every time you click on this, all right, what that does is it raises what's called a selected index changed event. This is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. And when you start, if nothing is highlighted, that's index -1. All right, so we want to make sure that every time we change the index, every single time we change that index, what we want to make sure happens is that event gets raised. All right, so if you look right here, and I think this will work, I'm going to try it just to be sure so you can all watch, is if I double click on this, there it is, the selected index changed. That is the default event. So you can double click on the list box if you want to, and to bring this up in the code window. So think about it, there's two things that we want to have happen. Somebody tell me this. Look up on the screen here. When I click this, right, come on. Well, when I do click one of these, I want two things to happen. What two things do I want to have happen when I click on one of those? I want the color, the change of the background, and what else? I want the synopsis to appear in here. That makes sense? So I have to do two things, all right? And I'm not sure which one I want to do, so basically I put this into a for loop. I loop all the way through it, and while I'm looping there, I check to see which one of these is chosen. And when I find the one that's chosen, I set the appropriate background color, and I set the appropriate label right there. All right? So that's what we want to do. So make this a little smaller. All right. Again, we start with 0 because that's the first element that we have in there. And while it's less than count, so please look again on the screen. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the count is 5. So we're telling it to go from 1 to 4 right there. All right. So now we have to check and see if we indeed select, if we found the one that was selected. All right. And the way we do that is if we say if, oops. All right. So I'll put a comment here. Cycle through all list box elements looking for a match. If a match is found. All right. Then we want that label synopsis, the label synopsis dot text. We want that to be equal to, let's put the word synopsis in there, plus the associated synopsis. All right, so that's the first thing that we want to do. And then we want to set the background color. Let's save this. Let's run it. I'll come right back to it. And let's see what happens. Red, blue. All right. Now, it looked like the first time we did this, it did put the synopsis in here. Oh, I didn't make it visible. That would probably help, wouldn't it? Label synopsis. Okay. Can you understand what's going on in there? It's the same thing that we just said when I asked the question. I think Brady answered it. What we wanted to have happen was what? We wanted to fill up that label with the appropriate synopsis, right? We want to set the background color to the associated synopsis, not synopsis, I guess, list box element. And then finally, we want to make the synopsis visible. That's it. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of stuff to this. But what we're starting to show is some interactivity. So while the program's running, different things can start happening based on what you're doing. So again, I'll come right back to it, but let's check. All right, there's the synopsis. Notice it's changing. All right. Now there's other stuff that we could do here. We could play with this. We could change the colors. You could set it up so that once you're not, you could have this maybe appear for a while and have it disappear. There's all sorts of stuff that you could do. That's not really what's important. What's important is that you understand what's going on in here in this code. So take a look at it, and if you have a question, please ask. All right? I'll leave this up there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and we'll take a break, and at 9:20, we'll write the other one. All right? We should be able to finish that by 10 o'clock. And if you remember that one thing I said I wanted to do with you today is I want to meet with each one of you, and I want to give you, so you know exactly what your grade is right now. All right, I've got a list of all your grades, and I got a list of all of your attendance. Now, one thing, and I know Tiffany had asked me about this, and I was able to change it, but I had to do a hack. If you don't know this, right now, it's set up in the ranking system to drop your lowest grade. All right. The problem is with some of you, the lowest grade it wants to drop is one of your homework grades that are out of 10 points, where you're like, oh, screw that. I want it to drop one of my tests that I got a C on. All right. And I got to ask Charles how I can do that. The way I did it with yours and yours is I had to take your lowest homework assignment and actually give you 2 more points. All right, which was stupid, but that was the only way that it would work. Yeah, yes. That's why I had to do that. With some of you, though, you haven't turned in several assignments. So it grabbed the first one you got a 0 on, and that's the one that it's dropping. I don't want to do that. But I don't know how to change it. Personally, what I wanted to do is I wanted to always choose your test grades and drop the lowest one of those. All right, but I have to ask Charles how to do that. I forgot to do that. And then finally, Valerie, I have that form, the other one. So you have to go in. I don't know if he's available right now or not. You know where the offices are? They're literally right across from where where we'll meet for where the conference room is. All right. Yeah. And he'll probably ask you to sign it, and then he'll sign it too. All right. Does everybody have that code? Does everybody understand the code? Yes. You had a question too?
Yeah. On the band, what's the difference between not leave and not up?
I believe the mouse leave is literally assumes that you're in someplace already, and the mouse up is when you've held down on the mouse key and then you let go of it. Okay. All right. So if you had any problems, this was the synopsis. And it really doesn't matter that much what you put in there. I mean, I would expect it to be something that would make sense. Not like this book stunk. You know, that's not a synopsis. That's an opinion. Okay? All right, and this was the colors right here. And again, it didn't matter which color you used. I just picked those. All right? But since it was part of the color class, we had to put color dot. And if you hopefully you noticed that as soon as you put color dot, the IntelliSense kicked in. All right? And again, if you have yours backwards, instead of red, blue, green, orange, yellow, you have yellow, orange, green, blue, red, or other colors, that's okay. There are a lot of different colors that you can use. I know the author in hers, she used, instead of blue, she used powder blue. And, you know, there's like daffodil yellow and corn silk and all these. I didn't care about that stuff. All right? But you should realize that when as soon as you type in color and you put in the dot, there's a lot of colors that come up here. All right. All right. So this was the code then for the mouse hover. You were supposed to make the quote visible. And for the mouse leave, you were supposed to make the quote invisible. All right. And then finally, again, that's the code. Knock this down a bit. Again, what I'm more concerned with, does everyone understand what's going on here? Because like I said, if I do pull anything on here for your test, your hands-on test, it'll be something like if you put your, you know, you could do this if we had buttons. You can have a hover for a button too. All right? And that's kind of what this really is. If you look up on the screen here, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but putting my mouse here, that's kind of like a tooltip. All right, you probably have all dealt with tooltips before in some kind of software or other. You may or may not even be aware of it. Many of these controls have a tooltip property where we could have set it up as a tooltip as well. So again, in about 10 minutes, I'll start up on the other one. That one actually has less code than this one did. Yes.
Say we want to change the color back to the control color from the mouse leaf to this box.
Okay.
How would you like? I'm trying to say color dot control, but
What are you talking about? For what? For the list box?
for the form,
For the form. Okay.
the current
Then
background color
I believe, let's see,
is under those weird.
under the mouse leave, I believe then you'd say here this dot back color equals, and then whatever it was, you know, color dot and whatever it was to begin with. So if it was white, now I'm not sure if that's going to change the list box or if that's going to change the form. So let's check. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, but then specifically, like, you know how it's like that weird grayish control color? How would you get that color in
Oh, that. Oh well, then you'd have to go back, and I'm going to figure it out a cheap way here. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to go add new item, I'm going to add a foreman and remove it right away. So that color.
Yeah.
All right. So then I go back and I look over here at back color. And it's set right now to control. All right. And that's under system. So I don't know if it'll let me do it like that or not, but I'm going to try. Oh. Console color? I don't think that's right. That doesn't make any sense. What I'd have to do would be to figure out what the actual parameters are for that color.
I was trying to look at the designer, but I couldn't find anything.
For the mouse, hover and leave the label quote bar. It's all the
This is the code you have in there? It's, and it's not working? Did you set the visible property in your design mode right here? Did you set this to false for both of these? So this right here, down here in the properties window, under visible, should be set to false in the properties. And so should that one. They both should be set to visible, and both of them should be set to false.
both say false.
So what happens right now when you run it?
So I can't.
Well, can you run it, or you get an error when you run it? Okay, click no. Label quote does not exist in the correct context. Did you change the? Did you double click on it and then change the name of the label? Go back up to the top. Name, label one. That's got to be called label quote. Now save it. Try running it. Those are in there, but you don't have the other one. So close it. Do the same thing. Click on the one that says reading opens your mind, and what is that one called? That shouldn't be called label quote. The other one should be called label quote. Yes, that one should be called label quote. This one should be called label synopsis. No, I'm sorry. You're right. Label quote and label synopsis. This one right here, that should be labeled reading like you read. Looks like it's right as far as I can tell. But you got to make sure that you spell them the same, because otherwise it's not going to recognize that color.
Is this one's false?
Yes. try clicking on one. Okay, so that's working. The synopsis is working. So the only thing that's not working right now is the quote. Was it both? Let's go back. Design mode. Single click on this. It's not recognizing the label quote for whatever reason. Probably because you put the code in first, and then you change the name. All right. Now, I'll give you a hack which may work. Go back and change it back to label 1. All right. Now, double click on this. Change this back to label 1. Oh, you still have label 1 here. That's why. You didn't have label quote. See that? Go back to where you just were. Change it back to label quote. Double click on this. Make both of these label 1. That was, did you see that? Didn't it just say label 1? Save it. Well, let's try it the other way. Let's see if that fixes it. So go back, change it, click on there, change that back to label 1. All right, now double click on there again. That changed it back to label 1. Save it. Try running it. Okay, the only thing I can think of to try to fix it, and this probably will work. Okay, stop the run. Let's see, click your. Okay. We're gonna remove it. So hopefully this won't hurt anything. So click go to design mode and just remove this whole thing. Oh, that will work, isn't it? That's the one. So click on that label and delete. All right. Now, do a control C. Now click down here, do a control V. Okay, grab that, put it back up there. Now, let's change that. So go on there, now put on there, change the name of that right now to label quote. Right where you are. Go back to the name. We don't want any text in there right now, just for right now, put label quote. All right, you got it. Now go down to the text. Put in whatever we had in there before. There, reading opened your mind in new worlds. Save it. If you try it again, if for some reason it still doesn't work, just turn it what you. I wouldn't click off of that. Okay, double click on that area. Say it's only 61, 66. Okay, then go back. That's my code. Go back to your code, and this will have to go back out of the quote. QUO. Save it. Try it again. You're not going to do it wrong. It's because of the way that you changed the name. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the problem is.
I figured out the other thing. System public dot.
Oh, okay.